Hey everyone, my name is Chris Hook. I am part of the iWIN real estate team. We are a team that focuses with and works with real estate investors. We're based out of Oakville, but we work sort of west end of west of Oakville, so anything kind of southern Ontario. Main areas that we focus on really Hamilton, Kitchener, Brantford, Welland. We do a little bit in St. Catharines as well. The topic that I'm going to talk to you guys about this morning is my first property, my first rental property. It was an interesting experience, so I wanted to share with everyone what that experience was like. The strategy that I used was a rent-to-own strategy, which is not typically a strategy that you see a lot today, just given the way the markets are going, but just kind of wanted to quickly touch upon my experience with that and a couple things that I learned through that process that will hopefully help you in your investment journey. So my first property was the rent to own on the Stoney Creek Mountain. It was a townhome. So with rent to own, there are a couple pros and cons with regards to the strategy. So the main pros with this strategy are that you have higher than average market rents, which results obviously in higher cash flow. So the reason behind it is that what you do is you charge a slightly higher rent premium, and that slightly higher rent premium gets applied as a rent credit when the tenant buyer at the end of the process decides to buy the property. And I'll get into finding the actual tenant buyer in a little bit. But so you have slightly higher cash flows. You also receive an upfront down payment. So in most cases, it's similar to like a lease agreement that you would get for a car, for example, where you put a down payment of maybe $5,000–10,000. So in most cases, it's usually $10,000, or it used to be at the time that we were doing more commonly doing rent to owns. The other pro is that the tenants that you're looking for, they're generally a tenant buyer, which means that at the end of the day, they're looking to purchase the property. So they will take care of the property. They'll do any updates for you. They're generally going to take really good care of the property because at the end of the day, their goal is to own the property. The other pro is that the returns are guaranteed. So I'll talk about this a little bit when I get into the numbers, but my particular strategy was a 5-5-5, which means that appreciation would be the total contract would be for 3 years, and appreciation would be 5% per year on whatever the purchase price would be. So that's kind of guaranteed and agreed upon before you actually get into the rent to own with the tenant buyer. And another huge benefit is that there's no realtor fees that are paid at the end of the transaction. So in most cases, when you're going to sell your property, you're paying 4 to 5% to the realtor in order to sell that property. In the case of rent to own, because the agreement is between yourself and the tenant buyer, it's like having a private sale or doing a private sale, where ultimately, you don't need to pay those realtor fees. So that could be a huge cost savings for you, and obviously helps to increase your return at the end of the day. The one big con for me when it comes to rent to own, and I think the reason this strategy is not used as much today, just given the current market conditions, is that your returns are capped. So, I mentioned the 5-5-5, the 3-year strategy where you get 5-5-5% each year in terms of appreciation. You're capped at that amount. You don't get more. So if the market goes up 12%, obviously you're only going to be getting a return of 5% in any given year. So that is really the downside of this particular strategy. But at the end of the day, you are getting, a good return. It's just not as good of a return. And for me, the biggest downside of the strategy, my original purchase back in 2012, I purchased that property at $285,000. That particular home is probably worth more than $800,000 today. There's actually a couple houses that have sold on that same street in that same townhouse complex that have sold for over $800,000. So obviously I was very limited in terms of my return on that property. If I was holding that property today, returns would be much greater, but it is what it is at the end of the day. I was able to get a relatively decent return in the 1 year that I did own it. Now, finding the property. So you obviously want to pick a city that you have good, strong fundamentals. So your bigger cities like Kitchener or Hamilton, this was a great strategy, 8 years ago. Again, it's not as commonly used today, just given the increases that we're seeing. But once the market starts to level out, we can kind of see some evening out of demand in the market with supply. This strategy might be one that you could incorporate a little later on in the next few years. So good. When we're looking at fundamentals, we're looking for things like good transit. Hamilton's a great city for that. It's got GO Transit going to and from Toronto daily. It's got the rapid transit that they've now got the green light go ahead to start doing that. It's also got lots of good jobs. It's close to major cities like Toronto, Brantford, St. Catharines, close to the US border. So it's a really good location. It's got lots of population, over 500,000 people there. So all of those things are things that we're looking for in a rent to own when we're looking to incorporate that strategy. We're not only looking for it in rent to own, but any other investment strategy, but I would say it's more important in a rent to own type strategy. When I was looking for my property, it took me a couple of tries to find the right property. And me and Erwin always go back and forth on this a little bit, but if you ever hear us refer back to a Stoney Creek property, it's the first property that we looked at. Cash flow on that was, at the time, it was break even. And I decided not to move forward with that property. At the time, it was $210,000. I should have bought 2 at the time, but I didn't. And those properties are probably worth just under $700,000 now. So, it took me a little bit of time to find the right property. I wanted a property. The reason I didn't choose the first property is because it was a condo town. So there was obviously a condo fee that was existed in that particular property, which I wasn't too keen on. So I ended up looking for a freehold town that I ultimately ended up buying. Typically, you're going to want to find a property that is one that someone is going to want to live in, and they're going to want it to be their forever home. So you obviously don't want a property that's in really rough shape. You want something that's pretty much turnkey so that you can get a tenant buyer in there as quickly as possible and close on that property and then get it rented out as quickly as possible. The reason I chose the Stoney Creek property is because the property was, between 6 years old and 15 years old. So it was a relatively new property. I knew that there wasn't going to be a lot of maintenance because the property was new. It was in really good condition. I didn't have to do any work on the property. There were like small little repairs that I needed to do. And the reason I chose that particular property was that I was looking for something that was going to be an easy investment. I wanted a single family home that was going to find a great tenant where I wouldn't be interrupted by the tenant. I planned on managing the property myself. So it really was an easy property for me to get started with in my real estate journey. I was a very nervous investor when I got started. So this for me was a slam dunk in terms of ease of property and stuff like that. So now I'll just quickly turn to finding the tenant. So really, with this particular type of property, people always wonder, why are people doing this strategy? And why would a tenant buyer want to actually purchase a property like this in the end? So, and why didn't they just buy the property themselves? The reason, the tenants that you generally will find are those that have usually no credit. So they're very new. They haven't used, credit cards in the past. They may be new to the country and therefore they don't have any credit. These are the types of people that make great tenant buyers at the end of the day. It could also be those people that had poor credit. So they lived a lifestyle that was not conducive to good credit in the past. They've turned their life around. They've become, much more consistent in getting their credit rating to where it needs to be. But that process obviously takes a long time to repair. So they also make great tenant buyers at the end of the day because they're obviously looking to make a life change, They're looking to do things the right way. They're looking to own a property at the end of the day. So they make great tenant buyers as well. You can also get people that are going through divorce. So that's a very typical one as well. So they might be in that transitional period, trying to get their life started again in the right path, in the right direction. They a lot of the times make great tenant buyers. So they're another form of person that would generally tend to be a tenant buyer in this situation. When you are looking for a tenant, I can't stress this enough, making sure that you do your due diligence on the tenant. So dig into their credit reports, make sure you ask lots of questions. You want to make sure that you're getting good references from people so that you can follow up with their references. And as I mentioned, just make sure you're asking lots of questions and that their story checks out, because that's really one of the key things. You want to make sure that you're getting a good person that you're relatively confident on in terms of being able to close on the property in 3 years or 5 years or whatever the term is that you decide on using with the tenant buyer. So now I'll just quickly turn to the numbers. So in my particular property, I purchased the property at $285,000. So my initial investment into that property was $57,000, which is the down payment plus my closing costs. So land transfer. I think I even had a home inspection at the time back in 2012. So my total closing costs were about $61,000. I talked about the original term being 5%, 555. So rent to own contracts, they are generally anywhere between 3 and 5 years, most typically. Mine was 3 years, so I did a 5% appreciation every year for the 3 years is what we agreed to initially. I had a great tenant buyer, so we didn't actually go the full 3-year term, but we did decide, kind of halfway through what the agreed upon price would be in order for us to kind of close up the transaction. So that was also good as well. So again, the term is originally, the term could be either 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. That's kind of typical for this type of investment. The other benefit I talked about earlier as well is the initial down payment. So at the beginning of the contract, you receive mine was a $10,000 down payment. I've heard of people receiving more than that, quite a bit more than that, but 10,000 is a good place to start. So the benefit of that is that really that down payment that you receive, that could be used to deploy somewhere else, whether it be another investment, whether it be another investment property. So that's a great way to get some cash back in your pocket right away. So if your initial investment in this case was $60,000, the down payment here, I got back 10,000 of that from the tenant just to sign the contract. My particular property closed early, so I closed within 14 or 15 months. We agreed upon a closing price of $320,000. So, my profit at the end of the day was $35,000 over 14 or 15 months, which is a great profit. Again, I didn't need to pay any realtor fees with regards to that, so that was pure profit of $35,000 less. My legal fees, which would have been $1,500 to $2,000 to get that closed and done. And my initial investment was, $60,000. So if you do the math on that, that's roughly a 50% return over a 1-year period, which is a great return. Again, current market value on this particular property right now is $800,000. So I've obviously missed out on all that upside. But for my first investment, being a nervous investor, getting my feet wet, it definitely, having that type of return in a short period of time was great. Another reason I didn't mention before as well that I wanted something that was a little bit easier is I had a newborn at the time. So this type of investment for me to get in and out of this investment, my wife was on maternity leave. It just made sense at the time for me. And obviously everybody's situation is different, but it was the right decision for me at the time. And then I used those funds to reinvest in another property that I ended up doing a student rental. So yeah, it worked out well at the end of the day. In terms of rents, this one here, I got $1,750 a month for rent. The average market rent at the time was $1,550. And I did a rent credit of $150, which ended up getting applied to the purchase at the end of the day. And then my monthly cash flow on this particular property was about $400 per month. So, you take the $400 a month plus the $35,000 that we made between the difference in the purchase price and the closing price. And I did quite well over that 1-year period. It was a win-win situation because the tenant buyer, who I believe currently still owns the home, has made all the appreciation on the difference between the $320,000 and the $800,000. So they've done very well for themselves. It was a win for me because I was able to make a good profit over a short period of time and then turn that profit and move it into a different investment, which also did me very well over the long run. So it really was a win-win situation for everybody involved, which is ultimately what you want at the end of the day. The only other thing I'll leave you guys with is that, in your worst case scenario here, so my worst case scenario here is that my tenant buyer is not able to close on the transaction within the stated period, in this case, 3 years. My worst case scenario is that I hold that property and I rent it out to another tenant and I hold it for a long period of time. So my worst case scenario here would have actually been a better case scenario than me actually having the tenant buyer purchase the home. But I did very well in this particular investment over the short period of time. So that's it for me today. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate everybody viewing. If you found this information helpful, hopefully you did, please hit that like button, and we hope to provide more content in the future. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.